Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Stronger Together 2021 Social Enterprise Drive Conference. It's time for the West Midlands Social Enterprise Movement to join together and collaborate our way to growth. And you're going to hear about loads of opportunities today around how you can grow. And we've set ourselves a challenge across the West Midlands anyway to double our combined turnover in 10 years. And I'm hoping today you're going to hear of lots of ways that you're going to be able to put that into practice. It's been a tough year, but let's go forward positively and grasp the opportunities as they emerge. After the video, which I'm going to play shortly, you're going to be hearing from Peter Holbrook, Claire Dove and Claire Spencer, and they're going to be setting the context for the growth of our sector. So let's go on, let's start, play the video.
Good morning, it's me, it's Peter Holbrook, and what a wonderful place to start this beautiful sunny day than with you. I'm joining you from London today, and it's a real privilege, and thank you for the invitation to kick off on this Thursday morning. What a great video, a really inspiring start to the day. Congratulations to the team at ISE for pulling that together. Fantastic. This is indeed the Social Enterprise Drive 2021. This session is particularly focused really on theory to practice, where we'll be looking at some of the key things that can really help achieve that kind of growth and success across the West Midlands in terms of building the social economy. It's lovely to see so many of you with us today, and I'm very pleased that for this session I'm joined by two giants of the social economy. I'm joined by both Claire Spencer from WMCA and the Inclusive Economy Unit there, and Claire Dove, who is the Crown representative for the VCSE, or as I call her Ma'am. Anyway, we've got two Claires for you this morning. That's almost Claire squared, I guess. Claire to the power of two. We are going to be using a lightning format, which I hope some of you are familiar with. That basically means we're going to go to our two speakers and they're going to give 7 or 8 minutes of kind of insight. I hope that gets your juices flowing. Please use the Q&A to put your thoughts, your questions down. And within, I guess, 20 minutes of now, we'll be kicking off into our discussion and Q&A session. And that should warm you up. Then there'll be a coffee break as you all head off into the session following this one. So without any further ado, I am delighted. I can see that they're now on my screen. I hope they're on your screens too. Claire Spencer and Claire Dove have both joined us. And I thought it might be helpful to kick off with a more kind of regional view really from the West Midlands before we bring in kind of our national voice. So let's kick off with Claire. Claire, you're very welcome. I know you're in the midst of Purdah right now with elections scheduled in early May, but I hope that doesn't limit all the things you're going to tell us about your view on how we can really achieve this ambition of growing and building the social economy in the West Midlands. So I'm delighted that you're with us. Over to you, Claire Spencer.
Well, I will try to avoid bland platitudes, of course. So my lightning talk is called Social Enterprise Growth is Inclusive Growth. And I'm really very pleased to be kind of starting this discussion today because it's so important. A big part of the role I do at the West Midlands Combined Authority is about translating the intention of a commitment to inclusive growth into action. And at the WMCA, we hold to a particular definition of inclusive growth, which is a more deliberate and socially purposeful model of economic growth, measured not only by how fast or aggressive it is, but also by how well it is created and shared across the whole population and place, and by the social and environmental outcomes it realises for our people. Now, I know that is a massively long sentence, but I really want to draw out some of the nuances that are really critical to how we translate this into practice. So this is a model which judges economic activity on its intention, on its purpose and outcomes, and not just on the fact that it happens. This is a model which seeks to grow the richness of those outcomes in the first instance. So we want to grow climate resilience. We want to grow well cared for human beings. And finally, this is a model where the people creating the value get to say what good looks like. So bringing this back to social enterprise growth, it sort of stands to reason that growing a sector which is filled with businesses led by local people, businesses that are trading for social good, it's going to be a massive part of achieving inclusive growth. And this was very much the view shared by the Independent Social Economy Task Force, which was led by some people who are in this room with us today. It ran for almost 2 years between February 2018 and January 2020, and really focused on that ecosystem of purpose that exists around the social economy, from voluntary and community groups through to community businesses and social enterprises in all of their forms. Now, as part of that work, which I was privileged enough to be brought into when I started at the CA, we discussed at length how to really distill the richness of the experience in that group into some clear goals and actions for the combined authority and the social enterprise sector, and all of the myriad ways in which we could measure the impact of those. And where we landed was pretty much as above. If the social economy, of which social enterprise is an important part, is inclusive growth in action, then let's have lots more of it. And that gave us the headline goal of doubling the size of the social economy in 10 years, as Sarah mentioned. So this brings us to the present day, and the WMCA is working with a consortium of social enterprise experts to craft a business plan that will really capture what we need to do to achieve this goal. Continuing the partnership working in a new form post-task force was really important to us, as I think that we need to show as an institution that we trust in the sector's vision and expertise and are committed to co-creating the work we do in this space. To borrow the title of today, we are simply stronger together. And it is from the first stage of this work that I will draw from in the rest of my time, because it has identified a set of 10 ecosystem factors that are conducive to social economy growth. And I think it would be really interesting to explore a few of these in discussion today. These ecosystem factors are all influenceable to a greater or lesser extent at different scales. And the challenge for this piece of work is very much about where we focus our resources. So the 10 are public policy drivers, business support, access to finance and investment, access to markets, commissioning and procurement, place-based development localities and clusters, social economy marketing and profile, partnerships, education, awareness and social entrepreneurship, and social economy subsectors. And I'm just going to use one blended example here to illustrate how I think this can work at regional level. And I'm going to focus on our WM 2041 climate change strategy. So in public policy terms, this has been created through the lens of inclusive growth, because it's not just about reaching net zero or improving climate resilience, even though those things are massively important in and of themselves, but it's about how we get there. The strategy is arranged around outcomes to that effect. For example, we will change our economy without leaving anyone behind, or we will use our industrial past to create a new future. Now, in that way, we draw a broader set of practices and outcomes into the frame when meeting the climate change challenge. Now, as our economy shifts to meet this challenge, there are opportunities to target specific sectors to create new jobs, products and services in the social economy, and to be really quite deliberate about stimulating the other ecosystem factors around this market opportunity. So home retrofit, for example, which involves replacing gas-fired heating systems and improving energy efficiency. This is the most significant one. There are over 1.1 million dwellings to invest in across the Combined Authority 7 Met area. And for example, workers' cooperatives could be particularly strong here, so allowing traders to stay small whilst using the scale provided by the co-op to take on larger projects and programmes. So too could social enterprise training providers focused on nurturing and supporting people to develop new skills so that they can step into the new reality. For example, teaching people who install boilers how to install ground source heat pumps instead. Another area is ecosystem services. Achieving biodiversity net gain and creating climate resilient places is more than just about planting trees, important though that is. It requires people in the construction supply chain to have a really deep understanding of, as much as anything else, how not to build. It requires planning officers to understand what places need and what the options are. It requires local groups to have the skills to act in guardianship over those natural assets that are so important to the resilience of their places. And finally, the circular economy. So we know that social enterprise is already really active in this space, particularly in the mend, remake, reuse kind of businesses. But as it becomes more of an imperative to divert waste streams from incineration and landfill, the value from those resource streams can become the basis of more social enterprises in this space. Now, in my last minute or so, I will touch on something which crosscuts all 10, which is how important it will be to measure the impact of all of this. What is measured is what matters, and understanding the impact of what we do as part of this effort certainly matters. And to me, this is about data, dialogue, and really strong evaluation. So there are data sets that belong to us that we can certainly improve. For example, overall spend with social enterprises and the wider VCSE sector. Now, we measure this really precisely when contracts are larger, but we need to get much better at being more mindful on the smaller contracts. We also need to think about the value into investing into other data sets that we don't hold, such as those held by Companies House, to get a more granular sense of whether the various ecosystem stimuli are bearing fruit on enterprises starting and sustaining. But we also have to be humble on this because data doesn't tell you everything, and it can't, so dialogue is massively important, and it happens in spaces like this. And it's really important that regular dialogue is built into how we understand our progress and to how that hold that work accountable. Because I think it's only by bringing data and dialogue together that we'll be able to chart a path to more social enterprise activity and better outcomes for the people of this region. And I will stop there.
Thanks, Claire. That was an exceptionally wide-ranging and very thoughtful kind of opening gambit. And I can see from the chat that people are very keen to distill that in a bit more time, really. So I don't know whether you're willing to share your notes. I certainly only got my list of the 10 ecosystem drivers. I only got to about 4 or 5 before I lost track. So it would be
I'll
great
share my notes.
to
pop them in the chat.
Perhaps. And thank you for that. And I'm sure that's stimulated a lot of conversations. I can see lots of applause bubbles in the general chat. So thank you for that great opening. It's now a great privilege to kind of turn to my old boss, probably still my current boss in some respects. Claire, lovely to see you from your home in Grassendale. Thank you for joining us. You dropped out for a moment. I'm glad to see that you're back. Over to you for your opening thoughts.
Thanks very much, Peter. I dropped out because hay fever is taking over, so I'm sneezing a lot this morning. Anyway, listen, good morning, everybody, and it's really great to be here. And Claire, there was such a richness in some of the, what you're trying to achieve here in the Midlands is, I'd welcome your notes also, because I just think fabulous some of the things that you're doing. And so this morning, I'm here in the capacity, not as Peter's boss, but as the Crown representative for the voluntary and social enterprise sector and working in central government. And the question is that how do we grow social enterprise in order to create more impact and also to ensure the sustainability of this great sector? But just a little on my role and my team in government and what we're trying to address and how we are trying to address that very question. So I am Crown Rep, and my role has been about driving social value through government and the ambition to create a diverse range of suppliers. So opening, and we really do need to open up these opportunities to the sector. For me, it's essential that every pound of taxpayers' money work for the wider good of our environment, our economy, and our communities. It is also more important with what we've been through over the past year and what is likely to continue with the pandemic, that we use social value to assist not only on the human and social devastation, but also the massive impact that it's had on the economy. So why would social value matter in government? But why should it matter to all of us? The public sector spends 292 billion on the procurement of goods and services, which includes 49 billion of central government. So, as you know, we've built a framework and we're looking at a minimum of 10%. Can you imagine what 10% of those figures could do or supporting our sector and our communities across the country, we could do some absolutely amazing things and maybe raise people out of the poverty traps that they're in at the moment, help young people who are unemployed and are facing a bleak future, if you hear what the news has to say constantly, and help many who've got mental health as a result of what we've been through over the last year. So we in government, is a couple of years ago, when we changed the wording of the Social Value Act from merely acknowledging to reporting. And that nuance on word change has led to the biggest change in procurement in central government. It has also led us to train 4,000 of our staff, their full understanding of social value, and all our commercial directors holding responsibility in those departments for making sure that social value is in every contract that goes out now, working to the strengths. So we have got the framework, and you can look at it in detail on the government website, PPM 06/20. And the framework, and Claire touched a bit on this also, is closely aligned to the Sustainable Development Goals. But the first point in the framework now changed over the last year. And the first goal that we are trying to ensure, it relates to COVID recovery and supporting communities recover from the impact, but also links very much to the levelling up agenda. And I just hope levelling up is not just a throwaway caption, as we often hear. We're going to, and we all know we've heard it in the past. So that levelling up really means a level playing field. That it means about a great education for all our children, not some of our children. So we have been working also with the sector. And as we open up after the COVID pandemic, which has hit, many businesses, but I'm sure many social enterprises, it is that we should speak about growth. But for some, this will be about recovery and sustainability, and that needs liquidity to happen. Why is Peter pulling that face? But it's also, it's what we do now that helps support economies, but also the foundations of our environment and value and equity across the piece. So we see these changes to procurement and government working to the strengths of the sector. We also want these opportunities of gaining contracts, especially longer term contracts, aiding sustainability. And now often what we've had is some of the contracts have been so piecemeal that you've just started them and are about to finish, that there is a 3-year, 4-year contract. We, however, need to look at collaboration, partnership and consortia as a way of coming together to support these, to support each other with these opportunities. And I also want to mention the Exiting Europe. We published a green paper on the simplification of procurement, and by God, it did need simplifying. So contained within that new green paper was the our ambition. Well, it's not ambition, it is going to happen, that we will ring fence certain contracts for the VCSE stroke SME sector. And these contracts will be of the value, it can only be a certain amount of 123,000 on goods and 4.7 million on construction projects. So this is what's happening in government, and our determination to get that diverse range of supplies. But let me just ask you some questions that may go into chat. So in the film, it talked about buy from social enterprises, but how many of us, each of us in our social enterprises, buy from other social enterprises? We have delegates here today from the public sector, housing associations, higher education, regeneration specialists. Does social value figure in your procurement? because I've heard a couple of universities writing papers on social value, on social enterprise, but when you look at their contracts, they haven't got social value, a framework of social value in their procurement. So we can't talk about it unless we're doing it ourselves. So it really is about how many social enterprises you have in your supply chain. And if you don't, let's make that pledge today that you'll go back to your finance directors, whoever, and ensure that this happens. The changes in government do not cover local authorities, but we are hopeful that they will. They can voluntarily do it, and I know some are doing it. So we need local authorities on board also, that they embody social value. As I said earlier, this is not only a good and moral thing to do, but it's got to help push and grow our economies as we come out of COVID. It really is a signal for change, as change has transformed us over this year. Good change will transform us for the future. And I'll stop there, Peter.
Thanks, Claire. Thank you. A really thoughtful and coherent set of points. And I briefly gasped because I thought for a moment we'd lost you, but it was a short pause on the live stream and you bounced back with aplomb. So thank you for that. Now, I am your third speaker today, believe it or not. I'm going to be brief because I'm really, really keen to get into the conversation as quickly as possible. I think what I would like to just cover really is kind of the view from SE UK in terms of what creates a thriving local kind of social economy. And first of all, for me, that's the power of networks and infrastructure, and that needs to happen at a localized level. Collaboration, cross-pollination of ideas, co-production and co-design do not happen necessarily always organically. They need to be catalyzed and kind of engineered and supported, and therefore we have to recognise the power of infrastructure and networks. Secondly, I mean, we've focused a lot on procurement, and I have to, take my hat off to everybody that's been working on this agenda for well over a decade, really. People like Claire, both Claires, in fact, people like Sarah. I mean, there have been a lot of people pushing for this agenda around more socialised procurement, and it's kind of, an important reminder to think that it was only, 30 years ago that we were all forced through, competitive tendering, which only allowed you to consider price. Best value emerged after that, which allowed you to think about quality. And really, since the Social Value Act emerged, we've been able to take decisions based on broader kind of issues around environment and society. But our own research suggests that that's still only kind of influencing around a third of public spend. And in a world where we're faced with so many big crises, we need to get to a point whereby it's influencing all decisions, not just all spend, in my view. We also need to talk about other issues. I mean, I think, conversations around things like business support and building networks and all that kind of stuff is all well and good. But let's cut to the chase. If we're really going to use the levers that we have to really propel the social economy, then let's talk about tax. I think what we've seen, for example, is right across the country, real challenges to our high streets. Why is it that we only consider business as one type of entity, which all pays a kind of standardized rate of local taxation? Surely we have to be able to become a bit more nuanced, really, and realise that things like betting shops are not necessarily forces for good on our high streets and should pay a higher level of taxation than those that are doing the hard yards of training and working with excluded groups and bringing them back into the economy. Why should we have a single rate of taxation? Surely we need to consider taxation as an important lever and one that is correlated against the impact of a business, both good and bad. And we're beginning to see that in certain places. We've seen that in places a bit like in Sunderland and in other locations whereby social enterprises that are running children's centres after the closure of Sure Start in their locality were given exemptions on local business rates. And we need to see much more of that and take a much more kind of brave approach, really, to encouraging the businesses that we want to see flourish and to use taxation as a disincentive for those that create harm in our communities. There's all sorts of other things. I think, collaboration, co-production and co-design are all very, very worthy words, but what do they actually mean? If you look at any kind of local authority, they're going to be challenged by some of the kind of constant things that we see. So the cost of keeping a child in residential care, for example, up and down the country is about £250,000 a year. These are big sums of money when you consider that that's the sort of budget that is attached to a child in residential care. Is the best way to competitively tender those contracts? Or does it actually require a bit of a conversation with a variety of different agencies and providers about how we can not only find more cost-effective ways, but how we can really drive better outcomes? Because it's not as if those huge investments in children necessarily always create the best outcomes for those children. And we know that 2 or 3 additional families in crisis can absolutely blow a local authority's budget in terms of social care. There have to be better ways, and that has to come through the process of sitting down with both service users and providers and actually designing new ways to address these really kind of intractable, intransigent problems that really do consume a huge amount of resource, but actually don't deliver the sorts of outcomes that the most vulnerable citizens deserve. So there's lots and lots of things to do, and we can talk about supporting startup social entrepreneurs with small grants, but we really need to help the existing network of social enterprises in our localities to scale. And we have to not just consider social value clauses as the route to do that. We have to think about the contracts that we're tendering and actually break those down into more piecemeal pieces so that the market becomes more accessible to smaller social enterprises, not just so that there's social value considerations throughout those opportunities, in my view. And what does the sector need to do? Well, the sector needs to build better evidence. It's always something that we struggle with. It's not easy. We are getting better. And I recognise that the point that Claire made around what gets measured matters. But actually, what gets counted is often the easy things to count and not the important things that we need to kind of understand. The complexity of some of the kind of interdependencies on some of these issues around poverty and inequality are really, really complex, and they need thoughtful investment in research and evaluation to really, really understand what is making a difference and where. And we need to sit down and we need to innovate. And there's a couple of thoughts here. This isn't just we've got every right to play a part in this market. I come back to the urgency of the crises we face. Over the duration of my lifetime, I've seen housing crisis built upon another housing crisis, built upon another housing crisis. I've seen inequality continue to increase decade after decade. I've seen social mobility continue to reduce. And I've seen things that I've been campaigning on for 30 years, like climate change and loss of biodiversity, continue to worsen. We are reaching a crossroads. And doing the same stuff that we've done previously with a bit more social economy glittered across it ain't gonna cut it. We need radical rethinking. Actually, we need to really, really drive purpose through all of the decisions we're taking, the disposal of assets, through procurement, through our taxation, through our approach to business support. We need some radical rethinking. And this is the time to do that. That's why this conversation is so very, very urgent. My final thought really is that it's great to see this market expand, and this market is expanding, no question about it. We're hearing that right across the UK and right across the world. But don't be complacent. That market isn't expanding just for us and just for you. That market is expanding for all providers. And we no longer have a monopoly, if we ever did, on social and environmental impact. We are getting big multinational businesses now coming in and absolutely using the language authentically or inauthentically of social change, of social value, of environmental improvement. So we cannot be complacent. We have to up our game. We have to become even better. We have to use our agility and our social capital and our political capital to really keep on pushing so that we can be the best that we can be. So that's it from me. They're my kind of quick thoughts. I've probably gone over my own time as well. I'm so bad. I always think, how am I going to fill 8 minutes? Then 25 minutes later. Anyway, let's cut to questions. I can see that we're creating some interesting dialogue in the Q&A. So let's look at the Q&A and let's see what questions are kind of coming in here. So we've got one, which is highest ranking in the Q&A. What can the sector do to access procurement opportunities? how should it get ready to trade this way? Now, look, it's got 6 votes. It's got the highest number of votes. So I'll ask you both for a brief response. I know both of you have covered it to some extent, but if you could just surmise again what it is that the sector can do. I'll come to you, Claire Spencer, first.
Cool. Yeah, thank you for saying surnames. Like working in a very careful environment at work, I know this is like a complete hazard area for me. So I think there are a number of things, and I will speak at least partly from my own experience of kind of assessing things. I think one of the things that's really tricky to overcome is the fact that when you are new to something, of course, you don't have a kind of glittering track record because you can't have done anything before you've done it, even if you've technically got the capability to do so. So I do think the role of consortiums is really important there. And I think this is a kind of in the spirit of co-opetition within the sector, where kind of there are things where you know you're going to collaborate with your rivals occasionally on, and that is fine. And that is part of building a kind of stronger market for everybody else. So I do think consortiums are a really good way to help smaller social enterprises and newer social enterprises to kind of take a step up into that world. And actually that sort of behaviour shouldn't be limited to social enterprise either. Like, I think we can reasonably expect that of the private sector more broadly, and maybe that's something to kind of focus on. I do think also having real kind of clarity of purpose in what you put into your kind of tender documents and your bid documents is really important. I think particularly in the early days of doing something, it's really tempting to just decant everything that is wonderful about you and what you do and all of your passion into a thing, but actually being really kind of like targeted and clear as to, you know, why you, why now, and how your team has the capability to deliver is really, really important. I would only caveat all of this with that I think we have a massive responsibility in the public sector to kind of write the sorts of tender documents and assessment processes that really enable social enterprise to be part of it. So as a matter of course, I always maximise the value element and kick the price right down, although, you know, my budget is really quite small, so the impact of that might not be massive, but I do think that's a really important habit to get into, as well as, you know, as Claire said before, breaking things down into the right sort of sizes as well to make it appropriate. But I will stop there because you both have interesting things to say also.
Excellent. Thank you, Claire. That was a really, really good response. And I'll call her the Dovester, as I sometimes call it, or the Dovener. Now, Claire, you used to run a social enterprise for many, many years, for over 3 decades. It's still a struggle, right? I mean, but for those of us that have managed to win contracts, it's still not easy. We still get frustrated about the process. So Claire Dove, what can the sector do to access procurement opportunities, and how should it get ready to trade this way?
Yeah, I think that's the first thing. The mystery is, where do you find these opportunities? Where are they? Tell us. And so in government, you can sign up to Contract Finder. It's free, or find a tender. You will then get alerts on contracts. The other thing, the green paper that I mentioned earlier, was that every department now has got to issue at least an 18 months pipeline of what's coming up, because we know that normally something gets released on the Thursday. For the following Thursday, we've got to get it in, and then we have to scramble to try and do that. And that's not good, because you want to get good bids in, because you want a really good service. So, you know, public sector and government have to really, you know, articulate what they want and work. And I mean, Peter talked about co-creating and all of those other things. That's also very important, because a lot of civil servants do not know what we need in the communities, not what we know, the in-depth knowledge that you gain being out in the field. So they've also got to do that also. We've been running a series of webinars since January for supporting the sector to a contract with government. And we're just moving on now to a sectorial approach. So all those working in the criminal justice, we'll be having roundtables with the MOJ, and there they will tell us the pipeline of what to expect. It's good communication. It's also, we have to look at digitally, can we do better? You know, there was a question on there about a construction business. How do I find social enterprises? Well, we need to make sure that it's easy for them to find them. So I'll stop there, Peter.
Brilliant, thank you. And from me, I mean, I'll just touch, Karen Lynch has a question that Claire's just referenced in the Q&A session. On your tabs, there's chat, participants, and Q&A, and we're using the Q&A tab because that helps rank questions in terms of popularity, and that's how us chairs determine which questions to choose. And Karen's question is, how should large businesses, like a construction one that she's just met in chat, find out which social enterprises they can work with in their supply chains as they build their bids to include social value? Well, there should be local networks. I mean, you know, Birmingham is a social enterprise city. There is an existing kind of infrastructure of knowledge that can help organisations like private sector businesses to partner with. One of the things that I've been scratching my head with, I mean, social value in construction has become a really, really big opportunity for the sector. And actually there aren't that many, or there aren't certainly enough social enterprises that are able to fit into those kind of construction and kind of infrastructure supply chains. And one of the things that we've been doing is talking to our bi-social corporate challenge partners. We've got 30, including some of the largest construction companies in the UK, about how we can actually joint venture and create joint ventures between the needs of the big construction companies and to ensure that social enterprises can fulfill those opportunities and populate those supply chain opportunities in a safe way. That doesn't mean that the social enterprise is taking all the risk. There's huge opportunities in things like scaffolding, some really, really interesting opportunities in terms of road maintenance, in terms of retrofitting housing for kind of a carbon zero future. And so there are some really significant opportunities that can create great entry-level roles for people that have been displaced from the labour market for some years, and real opportunities to progress into well-paid work. So that's my little kind of answer to that one. And I can see Claire's got a little finger up again. Claire?
One thing, Peter, also within government, we have strategic suppliers, and we are working with them, and there will be some meet the buy because they've got to subcontract. We hold them responsible, and in the yearly annual reports, they have to tell us how many social enterprises have they contracted with. Yeah. And so that is something, so we can start to see that this is spreading to get that diverse range of suppliers.
And if that fails, of course, what you can do is just drop a text message to the Prime Minister or to the Chancellor and see what happens. Amazing things can happen if you've got the mobile number of those folk, as I, of course, do not. Now, the other question in chat is how do we ensure that the staff and volunteers within social enterprises are also beneficiaries of growth within the sector? And I'm going to abuse my role as chair and use my white privilege to say, I think, because I've got a really strong view here, the best social enterprises are always those that take a holistic view to all of their stakeholders and don't just prioritise their beneficiaries over and above their staff. That, to me, can never be a sustainable model. You have to nourish your suppliers, your customers, your staff, all of the things that actually make your business function, including your community and the environment in which you're based. So for me, you know, when social enterprises succeed, all of their stakeholders should also see that benefit. And that's the best way to guarantee sustainable growth, in my view, growth that is creating shared prosperity across all of your stakeholder groups, means that the equity and the equality that we're all trying to achieve can actually be realised. So I hope anyone got another kind of thought on that one, either of the two Claires?
No, I think you're right, Peter. It is about everybody benefiting from the work that you do. I think for volunteers also, and it is about seeing the way of getting a job. That volunteering might be just that step on the road to getting something more permanent.
Great. And Claire, Spencer, any thoughts?
Yeah, no, completely agree. I think some of the most toxic organisations I have worked of or been part of tend to be those with really good social purpose, because that almost kind of subsumes everything, where it's like, I can treat you like rubbish because we're all doing something really good. And it's really, really counterintuitive and really kind of ugly. So I completely agree. And I do think that if we actually focus on diversifying and growing and nourishing the sector, actually your future within it becomes that much brighter, right? Like, you don't have to stay with the same organisation your whole life. And actually most of us nowadays will certainly not do that. But it's lovely to think that a set of places could kind of retain their talent and those people who really care about place, but who manifest those skills in different ways. So yeah, totally agree.
And I'll just come back on that and say, that I think when organisations have a single social mission that's very much driven by a single issue, that can be misinterpreted, a bit like the profit motive can be in private business, and actually all becomes about one thing at the exclusion of others. And actually, I would say to people that are on boards of social enterprises or even corporate businesses, that changing the rules of your business to reflect that ambition to serve all of your stakeholders is an appropriate thing to consider. So take a look at what your rules are telling you to do and your employees to do. And if it doesn't include the nourishment and the development of your staff and volunteers, then write those rules in. It's all within your gift. So there you go. And then I've got a couple of other questions that I want to touch on. We're in the last few minutes. Does the WMCA have a view on what the single thing is that will support the sector to grow? If only it was that easy, Claire, right?
Yeah, the WMCA would obviously be completely horrified if I attempted to speak for it at this stage. So I will just kind of caveat this with saying that this is work in progress and we have not yet approved the business plan. So I cannot give you a definitive readout, but I will say in general that we are exploring those 10 ecosystem factors really seriously. And I think in reasonable terms, you can conclude that what will enable the sector to grow is being able to kind of capture resources and lock in wealth, right? So if we look towards those bits of our economy and our public sector investment, which are seeing particularly high volumes of investment, and try to recapture that, I think it's reasonable to say that we could see growth arising from that, because that's like maths, which I'm very fond of. But I think we're really quite openly and honestly exploring the things that we can do, because actually not everything is about the CA. Like, people don't live in the WMCA. Like, you know, I live in Kings Heath and I live in Birmingham. Like, I don't live in the WMCA. It's not a thing to normal people. So we have to play the role that we play, and other partners, whether it's councils or social enterprises or VCS organisations, like, we've all got a role here, and it's distilling that, which I think is a really big thing to do.
Thanks. I'm asking people to speed up a little bit because we're in the final throes of this session, and I want to capture a couple of other questions here. Are social enterprises ready to deliver in public sector contracts, and what are the concerns? Claire, I'm going to come to you for a brief answer. Claire Dove.
I think that we are, and I think we have, but what we can't be seen as is a cheap option. We've got to be able to, and sometimes it might be more expensive, and I keep telling my colleagues in government this, but you'll get a better service, you'll get something that lasts, and you won't have to recall contracts back in that haven't worked, wasting taxpayers' money.
Brilliant answer, and I think that's it. We can't compromise on our mission and values just to follow the money. So at times it takes a brave chief exec or an organisation to walk away from what should be a contracting opportunity, because if you can't deliver high quality and you can't deliver your values as they are, then sometimes it is better to make the brave decision and find other opportunities elsewhere. There's another question around how do we ensure that we are reporting in such ways that we are not reinforcing labels and segregation within our society, but creating proper equity and cohesion within our communities. And I'm just going to take that briefly because I've got an oven-ready answer, if you like. I think that's why networks are so important. That's why kind of advocacy, the sort of work that we do at Social Enterprise UK and that happens in other regional networks and national networks is so very, very important, because the system is not functioning as well as it might. And therefore we do need systems change if we're going to change the world. And it is the hard yards of advocacy and campaigns that can come about over many, many years. Things like the Social Value Act, 10 years old next year. We've only recently got the changes to it last year that we've been calling for ever since its inception. That was a 9-year effort. So the systems change is patient, hard yards, and it needs your continued investment in the sort of work that all of us here are doing on this session to really to affect the systemic change that we need to see. So I think it's a really good point, really well made. Does anyone else want to come in on that one around you know, how we create proper equity and we don't just become another tool in a system that doesn't function well? Clearly not. That's all right. We're coming to the end of this session anyway, and I'm just going to see if there's any final questions that you might want to reflect on. What advice would you give to people just starting or new to the social enterprise world? Claire Dove and then Claire Spencer.
talked a lot today about networking and being with others within that space. And for me, when I had started social enterprise many years ago in Liverpool, as we went forward, having comrades on, people that I could that could give me support. And then when we got Social Enterprise UK nationally, it really was, I was able then to talk in Liverpool about the might of the social enterprise movement. So it is about, you know, joining things that can work for you and getting support, like in Birmingham with Sarah and the team here.
Thank you.
Being clear to your passion.
Thank you. And Claire Spencer, a one sentence answer from you, please.
What you have is what the world needs, so make that clear.
What a brilliant panel you are, and what a fantastic way to finish this session. Look, get your smiles ready, I've been told to say, as we hand back to the main kind of networking space. If you need to pop off to use the toilet, please turn your camera and mic off briefly, of course, and please move to a higher floor so we can keep the lower floors for active networking. We'll be back here at 10:10 sharp for an amazing session, I'm delighted to tell you. So join us for insights how social enterprises are growing internationally, nationally, locally, and consider the importance of mindset. So it's been a joy to be with you, Claire. Thank you so much for making my job easy. It's been great to be with such wonderful Claires. Now back to someone that isn't called Claire, someone that's called Sarah.
Thank you very much. Can I just thank you all, Claire and Peter, for a great session. I couldn't have asked, or we couldn't have asked for a better overview of where the opportunities are at the moment. And I'm certain that people will be following up on some of the things that you've been talking about. I'm particularly delighted that the context has changed around social value, and people really need to be grabbing those opportunities. And I'm also really, really glad that the West Midlands Combined Authority are taking the sector seriously and are seeking to put things in place that will really help us to grow. So thank you all. So we're going to close down now this session. You're going to move to networking. If you'll go onto a table, if you don't fancy talking to the people on that table, and I'm sure you will, just double click on the table that you want to go to and you will move there. And you've got a few minutes now to have a comfort break, talk to some people, and then we'll see you back very promptly at 10:10. Thanks very much.